So the next question is related to what I started to talk about, and that is, do we have a current secret space program operational near Earth or in deep space using advanced propulsion technologies? Yes, we do. Is it in deep space? That I'm not convinced of. I think, there's a wonderful Red Hot Chili Peppers song, and it says, space is made in a Hollywood basement. It's one of the verses. It's quite funny, actually. And there's a lot of truth to that. So what I'm saying here is that we have had gravity control when we inherited the scientists from the Third Reich and Adolf Hitler in the 40s, Operation Paperclip, and people like Wernher von Braun and Hermann Oberth and others came over. We inherited their state-of-the-art with electronic systems that cause so-called anti-gravity. Those were studied and then in development at the time that we downed, it turns out, confirmed now by this Air Force intelligence officer, 3 ET craft near Roswell. Now, that was a deliberate downing using a scalar electromagnetic weapon system that appeared to be in a radar dome, but it wasn't. And the reason they knew they were going to be there is that there had been ET craft observing all the atomic bomb blasts up from 45 through 47. And they knew that there would be ET craft in that area because at that time Roswell was the only nuclear bomb squadron in the world. So they switched this thing on. It affected the field propulsion of those craft. They crashed. The study of those objects combined with the work that had been done by T. Townsend Brown starting in the late 20s and 30s and 40s, and that had also been picked up by the Germans during World War II, which, by the way, their secret weapon was not the atomic bomb, it was this anti-gravity system. So all that came together between 1945 and 1955, and by 1954, we mastered gravity control, so-called anti-gravity systems, to a large extent. And so we began to utilize that. And the really sad thing about the conventional space program, and this is also true of Elon Musk with SpaceX and Richard Branson with Virgin Galactic, and you have all these things going up and exploding and using explosive propulsion. It's basically a Chinese rocket that's thousands of years old with a whole lot more power, and they're very dangerous, and they destroy the upper atmosphere and stratosphere, and we don't need them, and we haven't needed them since the 50s. But they want to keep those technologies secret, and so there is a clandestine, covert use of them where they do go to the moon, and they do go to probably some of the areas near Earth. My understanding, and this is at odds with what a lot of the mythology that you hear out there from, I think, people who have been given programming on this issue, such as Corey Goode, I'm skeptical that they're allowed to go too far out into space, because every credible person with firsthand knowledge I've spoken to has said that because we are viewed as a violent civilization, as Michio Kaku would say, we're not a level 1 civilization, which is the hallmark of which is living peacefully together and not destroying our biosphere. We're a level 0 civilization. So a level 0 civilization with nuclear bombs and weapon systems are not looked upon in a very welcoming way too far out into space. And so it's my understanding that we have had limitations placed on our ability to go there with spacecraft. Now, when you deal with consciousness assisting technologies and the ability to take someone and with these electronics have them go out and see things in space, they may be able to see things that are real. They may be programmed to see things that are false. And this is where you have to be very careful with the rumor mill of things that you see on Gaia TV and on the other networks that are out there, and the mythology that's built up, because frankly, I see a lot of that as a disinformation that is part of this long-term 60-year narrative to lay the foundation for there being sort of a cowboys and Indians, good guys and bad guys in outer space, that we need to, as Ronald Reagan said, unite the world against an alien threat. And when Reagan said that, by the way, it was shortly after a man that I knew, Colonel Holman, who's passed away, had done a briefing to get, he was an Air Force guy, to get the President's team to support SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, or Star Wars, to put weapons in space. And what they were doing actually is getting a lot of funding that went through the back door of sort of brilliant pebbles and other silly systems that never, those were just window dressing. And they were going into these black projects, these $100 special access projects, and the USAPs were taking that funding and expanding their ability to target ET spacecraft when they step down into linear space-time from transdimensional, hyperdimensional space-time. So that's what people need to understand. Reagan was manipulated into saying that at the United Nations when he said, wouldn't our job of creating world peace be easier if we had a common alien threat to unite against? And I think this narrative, which goes back, as I mentioned, to the 40s and 50s, was the big battle that took place between people like Secretary Forrestal and Eisenhower on the one end during the 50s, who wanted to denuclearize, have open contact, and move forward, and Jack Kennedy wanted to do the same thing, and the military-industrial complex, which outmaneuvered Eisenhower and outmaneuvered and eventually killed Forrestal, to ensure that this other agenda went forward, which is what we're living through right now. And I think when you look at the capabilities, yes, they are there. To what extent they've been deployed, I'm a bit agnostic about that. But certainly when Ben Rich, the head of the Lockheed Skunk Works, said to Jan Harzan, who's a very good friend of mine and is the head of MUFON International, but at the time was an engineer for IBM, and two other people on my team, the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, the super secret research and development part of Lockheed Martin Aerospace, Ben Rich said, well, he said several things, but one of the things he said is, we already have the means to take ET home. In other words, that we have developed interstellar capabilities. Now, he did not say we've been allowed to go that far out there with it. So the question is, yes, we have a secret space program. Yes, we have anti-gravity. Yes, we have the physics for transdimensional, faster than the speed of light, so-called teleportation and what have you. The question is to what extent it has been used and allowed to be used by interstellar civilizations that are trying to contain what they view as an existential threat because humans have not become peaceful. And I think that begins to be the bigger and deeper question that nobody ever addresses. So these are the things that I want to go into in this webinar. It's way beyond the scope, of course, of this film. Maybe someday we'll do a film just on this, but that'd be so esoteric. If what we're doing with Unacknowledged is to get the facts of the most salient facts out to the widest possible audience, what we're talking about right now would be something that would have to be a couple steps down the road in terms of people being able to even understand what it is we're referring to. So